when the pandemic happened, they stopped baptisms in our diocese, which is insane because that's kind of necessary for salvation. I mean, it's kind of a big deal. And I talked to a priest friend who's a good friend, and he was like, well, I want to be careful about doing it another way because I want to be obedient. But the thing is, if you've been in the Novus Ordo for years, okay, if you've been in the Novus Ordo and you've put up with everything, because they've made you put up with a lot. They've made you put up with the liturgy being destroyed, everything.
You're like, well, I don't want to receive from a lay Eucharistic minister, so I'll just walk around the back of the church and get in a different line. So you've played that game for decades now. We all know that game. But that does, over time, weaken us.
It breaks you down.
It breaks us down. Yeah.
So then you have to convince yourself that by obeying these things that make you unhappy, somehow that's helping you grow in holiness.
Mm-hmm.
Which is possible, like I said, in certain contexts, but not when it offends God.
Yeah.
That's the kicker. And Catholics now, even those of them who are pious, many of them will obey their bishops off a cliff.
Yeah.
And it's a false form of obedience, I think. Yep.
And St. Thomas Aquinas is very clear. I thought Father Nolan of the Fraternity of St. Peter did a great job dissecting this. He said, in order for a law to be a valid and real law, it must meet 4 conditions: the formal cause, the material cause, the efficient cause, and the final cause. This is Thomistic thinking. So the law must be in accord with reason. Mm-hmm. It must be for the common good. Mm-hmm. It must be made by proper authority, magistrate, and it must be published or promulgated.
Yep.
I can't make up a law and not tell anyone and then start arresting them for them. It has to be put out in the public. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to some of these things, they fail on, is it in accordance with reason and is it for the common good? Yeah, it might be the bishop, that's just authority.
Yep.
But if it's not in accordance with reason and it's not for the common good, it is not a valid and binding law, rule, precept, canon law, whatever. If the bishop said all fathers of families must wear a rainbow bow in their hair in order to receive Holy Communion,
that's silly.
He'd be the authority to talk about something and receiving communion, and he promulgated it. That's good, but it's not rational and it's not for the common good. So we wouldn't do it. And Kennedy, he didn't even have hair to put the bow on. He had to put the bow in his beard.
Yeah.
Okay, so we would not have to obey it. And I'm sure, Kennedy, there'd be some Catholics out there and say, "Oh, Marshall and Hall, y'all are bad Catholic. The bishop said you must obey the bishop and wear the rainbow bow."
Yeah.
Hair bow in your hair because bishop says, and we have to obey. But that's not Catholicism.
No, and it's not historical. It's ahistorical to have this type of obedience. It's not just Marcel Lefebvre. The reason why Marcel Lefebvre acted the way he did is because he looked at church history.
Right.
It's rare, and thankfully it's rare, but there are times when bishops and popes get a little bit crazy.
Yep.
When they get a little bit crazy, you say, well, I can't obey God and man at the same time if they're in contrast to one another. Right. So you obey God. But the whole while but it's a tragedy when it happens. It's not something you revel in. It's just something that happens. Yeah, Saint Athanasius is a big example, but there are other ones. There are other non-saints who were just courageous men who at various times in England and places like that did it, and we're in one of those times. And maybe you do have a good bishop. Like if you have a good bishop, you're very lucky, thanks be to God. Push that and support that guy because that's awesome. If you have a bishop who says cancel baptisms because de facto he's saying you don't need it to be saved, that's a problem.
Maybe not.
Yeah. Maybe not. Maybe
yeah,
exactly.
Maybe not. Maybe, but definitely not.